Okay. The final problem, the last episode of Sherlock Series 4, possibly the last episode of Sherlock we'll ever get. I mean, you know, it's not out of the realm of possibility, but it certainly ends on a note that feels like we need to end this in a way that might be okay to be the last thing we ever do. So, yeah. If you saw my earlier video talking about my concerns about how Euros was going to be handled and some things that I were afraid might happen, well, almost everything I was afraid of did in fact end up happening. Not quite all of it, and I'll start by covering the stuff that works, because I know, much like when I talked about the Six Thatchers, once I get into the stuff that I don't like, it's just gonna get ranty and that's hard to come back from. So, stuff that worked. I actually liked how Moriarty was used. And that was one of the main things I was worried about. And I think they managed to integrate Moriarty into the episode in general and into Euros' story in particular without undermining him. They make it clear he always had his own thing going on. It's just that for this last sort of post-mortem thing that he's torturing Sherlock with, he is involving somebody else. And I'm okay with that. So obviously he was starting to mess with Sherlock before he ever met Euros. I like the use of this footage that he has put together for her and left her with. And I will say, overall, his use is just really solid. It's very good. It's very clever. They managed to close out his story without undermining him, which I was pretty sure was going to happen. That didn't. That was one of my fears that did not come true. Oh, I didn't mention there's spoilers coming. So if you're still sticking around and you didn't figure that out yet, yeah, spoilers. So the best section was the stretch of the thing where Mycroft and Watson and Sherlock were on that island after Euros had taken over the facility, and she was just putting them through tortures and games. That was the best segment, and that felt, well, it felt very Moriarty, so it did feel a little bit like a retread, but I thought that was the strongest bit. It was the tensest, it felt the most character focused in a way that wasn't stopping the story dead, and that is kind of it. Most of the rest I've got problems with, but it pretty much all circles around Euros. Now, this thing dug itself a really big hole early on, and I never quite completely pulled out of it. And that is what we find out about Euros and sort of how she operates and what she is about and what she does completely broke my suspension of disbelief on two levels. First off, this whole thing that Mycroft sets up is like, anyone she talks to, she can manipulate and get them to do what they want. I'm sorry, it doesn't work. It pushes this idea too darn far. Basically, they just gave her super hypnosis. She is a super villain. She has a superpower in this. And I mean, I know Sherlock has always kind of had, you know, super intellect or whatever, but because he's just making deductions and you get a breakdown eventually of how he figured stuff out, it does at least seem like, okay, if my brain could operate that fast, maybe I could still figure that out. He's looking at the same stuff everyone else does. He's just making the connections much faster than most people. What Euros is doing defies any sort of basis in reality whatsoever. In my mind, there's really only two ways you can do this whole sort of the psychotic person who manipulates people to do what they want. Either you do sort of the Joker Dark Knight thing, which was more implied in that thing, but where they pull in and people with comparable psychoses gravitate towards them and find them magnetic and want to listen to them and follow instructions. That's option one. That works. Option two, if you want to show them getting a more or less normal, stable person to do things that are completely outside of what a normal, stable person should do, then you've got to go the slow burn. We've got to see this person break down that normal person and really mold them into something that is believable. And they don't take the time to do that. You know, things like the TV show Hannibal did that really well, or something like Gone Girl, where they take their time. So much of the plot hinges on the idea that just a few minutes talking to her and she can control what you can do, and I'm sorry, bullshit. If they could have found a way to strictly limit it, like to just the director of the facility, that's one thing, but she's obviously got control of every single person in there because the guards and whatever are doing things that if they were still in their right minds and the director was just telling them to do, they would go, no, I'm not going to do that. You're obviously nuts now. But they didn't. They did it anyway, so the clear implication is that Euros is controlling every single person in that facility. Bull! So there's thing number one that broke my suspension of disbelief with her. The other thing that broke my suspension of disbelief with her is the level of exactly how psychotic she appears to be. Because for what we've already seen her do, she has to be able to hold it together actually pretty darn well. And from what we see by the end of this episode, she kind of can't. She actually has to yell at the guards to pull her off of Sherlock to be sure that she doesn't kill him before, the circumstances under which she wants to do it. If she's just left to her own devices, she's not going to be able to stop herself from killing him. And yet, going by what happened in the previous episode, in The Lying Detective, we have to be able to swallow that she was John's shrink for multiple sessions, held it together well enough that there was no indication until she was ready to show him that she was completely off her rocker, plus spending a significant amount of time right in front of Sherlock while Sherlock was making deductions. Think about that. Yes, I know he was whacked out of his mind on drugs, and I'm not expecting him to recognize Euros, but he was making deductions, and they were all accurate to the person she was pretending to be. So she had to be together enough to gather everything she needed about Faith and about Culverton Smith and get all that thing and put it all together so that Sherlock would make the deductions that would lead him to the conclusions that she wanted him to get to, while not giving any indications of anything that would be in any way disparate with the image that she's trying to project. She is not together enough to pull this off, not the way that she's depicted in this episode. I will buy that she's intellectually smart enough, but she's not stable enough. I mean, for crying out loud, every time she closes her eyes, she's a scared little girl on an airplane. You're telling me that woman was able to pull all this off? Again, no, bullshit. And then the whole thing goes for emotional weight at the end, and it doesn't work because we've just met this character. And okay, another thing that is completely unnecessary, finding out that Redbeard was in fact yet another home sibling is totally unnecessary, because it's not suddenly like we go, whoa, she really is that crazy. We've been watching her kill people already. We know how crazy she is. The idea that she killed her brother does not up the crazy factor. We're already watching her potentially have had the option and might have been able and willing to kill her siblings already up to this point. So that doesn't add anything to dimension. It's just needlessly cruel. And I don't mean cruel for the character, I mean cruel from the writers. Why? There was nothing gained by having it be another brother instead of a dog, other than to stretch credibility further on Sherlock's entire self-imposed rearranging of his memory, because now he really stretched that. And now I think I get why all the other series ended on cliffhangers, because the way this thing ends, it's cheesy. It's painfully cheesy. And like, look, I'm happy that they, rebuilt the apartment and they're taking cases again. Great. That's what I want from them. But really a slow motion, no context run out of a door, off they go on another case. My God, how 90s TV movie freeze frame on the high five kind of BS is that? And Lestrade's line when the other cop says he's a great man, and he goes, no, he's a good one. Oh God! Right before he said it, I said, "Oh, don't say it, don't say it." And he said it. My God! Look, like I said, there are some solid things here. Something I didn't mention earlier: Mycroft's really good in this. Sherlock and Watson are fine by themselves, but everything about Euros does not, well, almost anything. The vast majority of Euros doesn't work because they're asking us to swallow things that don't fit into this universe. I mean, the world of Sherlock as it's been built is not a 100% realistic universe. I don't need it to be a 100% realistic universe, but the world that they've built doesn't allow for super hypno voice crazy girl. What I wish they'd done instead was just had it be all Moriarty. I mean, you know, come up with some kind of high-level henchman to actually pull some logistics, but like, I think back to the part that worked the best when they were trapped in that facility and we were getting glimpses of Moriarty. That could have all just been recorded and it could have all been set up by him and they just had to battle the ghost of Moriarty effectively one more time. I think that would have worked so much better and we still would have gotten what were the strongest parts of this episode. But Euros just wrecks this whole thing, and I don't blame the actress. I think she plays it as well as it could be played. From a writing standpoint, it was a bad idea and it's not well executed. I honestly don't know if it could have been executed all that much better. It's a bad idea. I said that I needed them to stick the landing on the series and they really didn't. It's not the worst fall down in quality for a finale I've ever seen. You can go on back and see my rant about the series finale for Dexter. You want to see about something really failing on every level. So this is not that, but this is a big disappointment. Really, for the ending of the series, potentially the ending of the show. Nah. Look, The Lying Detective was still great. I stand by my review. I didn't talk about it before, but The Abominable Bride I really liked. So the series 4, half of it is really good, but the other half, wow, no, just no. So those are my thoughts on the final problem, and it was a problem they could not solve. Have you seen it? What did you think about it? Whatever your thoughts are, drop something down in the comments. Let's talk about it. Don't forget to like, subscribe. Go ahead, hit that bell down there so you get notifications when new stuff goes up. Follow me on Twitter at Council of Geeks. Check out the Council of Geeks podcast, available on iTunes and Stitcher. And until next time, this council is adjourned.